Welcome to the Secure Connections podcast, a weekly series from IOTSA, the channel's own Internet of Things Security Services Association. As always, I'm your host, Brian Sherman, Content Director for IOTSA, and joining me today is Steve Weber, Global MSP Sales Engineer for Sophos, a worldwide cybersecurity company focused on next-gen endpoint, firewall, and other cloud-based solutions. Welcome to the Secure Connections podcast, Steve.
Hey, thanks, Brian. Thanks for having me.
Good. I'm glad we coordinated today. It's always important to look good.
Absolutely. Got to be wearing that blue.
Yeah. For those that are on the podcast part, probably are wondering what we're talking about. But for those who use video, we really didn't coordinate ahead of time. But I'm never fashionable that way. So while we've had the pleasure of talking with other Sophos channel team members over the past couple of years, I believe this is your first time on the IOTSA podcast, Steve?
Yes, it is. Yeah, first time joining.
Good. Well, welcome. That also means that we would love to learn a little more about you. For example, how did you get into the IT field?
Oh, God, we have to go way back on that one, huh? So I actually started this as a business major way back in college days, and it actually kind of just gradually morphed into a computer experience, and figured out really quick that I was really good at going in and modifying the surroundings, the things around me, computer components around me, knew how things worked and how to get across. So it went from there into helping networks get set up, into helping with the security aspects, to starting my own MSP, and ultimately landing here at Sophos.
Awesome. Now, did you go to school? I know you live in Florida. Did you go to school down there?
Yeah, actually, where I'm at here in Lakeland, Florida, I went to school at Florida Southern.
Awesome. Well, great. So you got into the MSP business, obviously, into Sophos. Let's talk about cybersecurity. What do you think? You were an MSP yourself. What do you think about the transition that's taken place the last couple of years in cybersecurity as far as the responsibilities for an MSP and all the things they're facing today?
Yeah, it's definitely a very evolving threat landscape that's out there today. So even back when I started, and my MSP, we started in 2000. And at that point in time, you were still looking at a traditional antivirus component, whereas today we're seeing the ransomware. We're seeing more advanced attacks happening in the environment. We're seeing the shift to AI from a protection standpoint, but not only from a protection standpoint, but the bad guys are also using AI as well, to help their attacks against the customers as well. One of the ones I've seen recently, which is actually pretty cool out there, was pretty scary as well, was they actually were able to have AI programmed and learn a CEO's voice and basically read off a script for that CEO and convince one of the people there that, hey, this was the actual person calling me and I needed to follow his directions on there and transfer money. And all because it sounded just like him. The mannerisms were just like him. So yeah, it's shifted a lot, and it's definitely got us to where we have to be on our toes.
Yeah, I mean, it was one thing when we were doing text-based, like social engineering, but now I had one of those calls come in yesterday from my social security number apparently is being revoked. I was informed yesterday by a computer, and I needed to get my credit card information to get that set up. So, yeah, it's really scary. But what should MSPs be doing to address the shifting threat landscape? You talk about all the innovation going on, AI and other things. How does this affect them and their priorities, their ability to support their clients?
Well, I think the biggest thing is, cybersecurity, if we talk about it kind of in the past, was always an add-on conversation. It was something that, hey, we need to talk about, what are you doing to protect? And it was never a, right up front part of the conversation. So today, what we really need to shift, and kind of that landscape needs to shift for the MSP, is cybersecurity needs to be that first conversation when you're going in and onboarding a brand new customer. How am we going to protect your network? What tools are we going to leverage to protect your network? And hey, Mr. Customer, those tools may not always be the cheapest tools that are out there, but this is to protect your network, to ensure that I, as the MSP, can go in and ensure that your data is secure, that your your employees are up to date and know what's going on inside the environment. They know what to look for. They're not just going in blind and susceptible to these types of attacks. So I think the days of going in there and just putting in some basic security components in there, and again, it just being an afterthought, is really starting to shift. It's now hey, we need to have that conversation first.
It's kind of getting into theory and a lot more structure than just the tool set today is basically what you're saying too. Is walking into a client is kind of an assessment mode from the time you step in until the last day you're supporting that client.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and you as the MSP, your reputation is on the line as well. So if that customer is not secured, something happens to them, they get compromised, whatever the case may be, that's putting your reputation as the MSP, the one protecting the network, the one managing the network, on the line. So it's definitely something we got to keep on the forefront.
Very good. Now, Steve, you've done the presentation at the IO. It's a Cybersecurity Expo too, and specifically talked about supply chain attack. Can you kind of give us some background on what are you referring to, and how does that affect the MSP community?
Yeah, absolutely. So this one's actually, it's not a new tool or a new type of ransomware that is out there. So it's nothing we have to go and actively look for. But what it is a strategy that the cyber criminals are using to target companies. So instead of me going after a company directly, I'm going to go ahead and target the third-party software and third-party vendors that company is actually utilizing. So essentially their supply chain. So it means just like what it sounds. It's the supply chain and what you use to run your business. So how this is affecting MSPs is every business, and I don't care what business it is, an MSP, the customer you're supporting, you have software, you have components that you are using that are from third-party companies. In the case of an MSP, your RMM tool, your PSA tools, your backup technology, that's a basically trusted relationship with that vendor there. And there's also smaller components on there, accounting, who's dealing with your accounting system, who's going into dealing with, the AC controls on there, a lot of different components, a lot of different vendors coming into our businesses that, could potentially be a way to compromise that organization. So, I mean, that's what we mean by supply chain attack.
So if I'm a provider, and typically you're looking out towards your clients, client focused, obviously, to make sure that they're secure. Looking internally to make sure your business is secure. How can they look to their vendors, to other companies that they're working with, that are they're either using their tools or they're connected somehow through networks? How do they know that they're protected, and what are some of the best practices to use to make sure that they're doing everything diligently they can to prevent supply chain attacks?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is obviously we can't control what's going on in our vendors' networks. We can, as you interview a vendor, as you interview or decide on getting access to third-party software, there are some risks involved in there. But what we need to do is ensure that when we bring those vendors into our networks, and these IoT devices are another good component of that. A lot of people are just taking these IoT devices, cameras, webcams, these controls for our AC units, and putting them right on our main network. So they've got, if they get compromised, they don't have the same level of security. They're right on the same network with everything else that is out there. So going in and ensuring that your network is segmented, your network is locked down and secure, and that those vendors that are coming into your system only have access to the certain parts of data that they need to have access to, is how we're going to basically go in and prevent additional breaches from happening in the future.
Now, are you getting some of those questions from your partners more than you had in the past, as far as what is Sophos doing, and how can I be sure that I'm not getting a supply chain attack that's coming from Sophos or other companies that you work for? I'm sure that's becoming a more common topic today.
So amazingly enough, I don't get a whole lot of questions on that. You would think you would, but obviously us in the the business, it's first and foremost on our mind as well. When we deploy anything out to one of our customers, it's how can we control that? How can we make sure we've got multi-factor authentication for getting into our console, so that we have to have that two-factor. Hey, we know your password plus that token that you have before you can get access to the security software and go and disable anything. Those audit change logs inside of the software to ensure we know who did those changes inside of our environment. And then if there's any remote control aspects, again, we know who did it, who ran it, what happened on the environment. But yeah, it's coming up more and more from a security side. I don't see that question being as asked as much as it probably should be from the MSPs, but it is something they should be definitely taking into account.
That makes perfect sense. Now, I know many of the examples, like the targets and the others that were supply chain attacks in the past, were enterprise. But I think you touched on the SMB element of it is, and maybe we're not as diligent when it comes to the SMB part of that either. It's kind of a new, I won't say a new thing, but over the last year, these threats have been more publicized. And even at that, there's still, like you said, the questions are not coming back from MSPs and others to the vendor side, but I expect that to change. What how can MSPs, or how should MSPs be educating their SMB clients on these type of attacks?
Well, I think the biggest thing is, well, they definitely should. So I think the problem, and you touched on it there with the enterprises, we see these big headlines that get posted out there, Target. And basically you get that SMB, MSP looking at that, and the first thing that comes to mind is, it's Target. Of course they're going to get attacked. They're not going to come after me. Well, you've got relationships, or maybe you're not the prime person that they want to get access to, but as part of your business, you've got relationships with other vendors. You deal with bigger corporations that you're selling your service to, or a subset of your service to, and maybe that's where that attacker wants to get to. So you have to come in from that standpoint of educating the customer that, hey, yes, you are not target, but you very well could be at risk, and at risk meaning that, obviously that HVAC company that was in there with Target going in and monitoring all those components, I'm pretty sure Target went in, and that was probably a small business, went in and analyzed that relationship they had with them, and did they let them go after that? Did they reassess the security concerns after that? That's very damaging. You went in, and that was a major public incident in there. So if you're that vendor, that small business, that HVAC vendor out there, that just hurt a huge part of your business on there, and ultimately that could shut you down.
And these are the tough conversations, I think, for MSPs. We're getting a lot of questions about this these days. I talked with a provider who had had his clients compromised through his own systems a little over a year ago, and he's very honest and open with what he's had to change. But the messaging to go in and say, by the way, other companies have been hit with this that do what we do, and this is why we're doing these things. It's a little bit concerning, I think, for some providers who are used to, we're going to stop everything. We are your security people, to say, you know what, our industry is vulnerable as well. And I think that's a hard topic, or a tightrope for many to try to figure out how to communicate that message through. But honestly, those are the discussions that need to happen a little more, especially as we get into 2020 and you start seeing, AI attacks and some of these hacking groups that are gaining more power. What are your thoughts as far as that, as far as communicating to the end users the risks?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely our job as those security ambassadors out there to, just like we're doing today, educate, in this case, the MSPs, have them educate their customers that, this is a big risk, that, this is something that is not going away. The ransomwares that are out there, the bad guys that are profiting off this, is big business for them as well. And they're going to take the money any which way that they can.
Yeah, the innovation that's coming is scary, because it's not always innovation to stop. It's sometimes the innovation and the technology that's being used to hack into systems. But now, I know we've kind of covered the supply chain part, but what are some of the other big threats to the SMB that are rising to the top in your mind?
So I would say some of the other bigger threats, obviously ransomware is always top on mind for most MSPs. It does a lot of damage. We need to have our good protection tools in place. We got to have our backups in place to ensure that we can recover from these types of incidents. But what we still see as a major concern, and as a major avenue for these bad actors getting into these environments and getting ransomware deployed and exfiltrating data off of these systems, are these phishing attacks. So phishing is still one of the top level components that we're seeing out there. And what we're we obviously have a lot of tools that are out there, but what we're not seeing is a lot of education on, pushing that education component from the MSP into the customer, saying, "Hey, we need to train you on what is a phishing attack. What are we going to look for when these come in?" And there's quite a few different types of attacks. So everybody, when you hear phishing, the first thing that comes to mind, email. It's probably where most people are thinking. They're like, "Yeah, this is coming in through an email attack." What we
Right.
just saw this week here at Sophos was a "What's Up" based phishing attack. So somebody actually took the CEO's picture, a headshot out of there, got a lot of company details about that particular organization, found the other employees that might be surrounding that person but not directly in correlation with them, and started messaging them. And part of that, and part of what we see as kind of the hallmarks of these types of scams, is a sense of urgency. So there's always something urgent that's going to happen in these types of scams, whether it's coming through email, whether it's the fake phone calls on there. Obviously, you said on there, your social security number is compromised. Urgency. This is important. So that kind of level of urgency is kind of like one of the biggest telltale signs on there as far as, hey, red flag. This is definitely something I need to pay attention to, and look at the details a little more closely on there. And then the other part we start seeing is they start asking for confidentiality. Hey, we have this coming through the system. Please don't let this out. This is very confidential. This can't be talked about. There's these certain things in play. Please get this done as soon as possible. And then the last part of that is the pressure that they start to add to the person that they're attacking. Hey, multiple contacts or multiple phone calls in their emails, text. Hey, can I count on you? I need this done very quickly. Putting that pressure that, hey, if you don't get this done, and you're thinking this is the CEO of that company, my job's at risk here. I need to get this done as soon as I can. So going ahead and sending that money out to that bad actor in there. So, and that's kind of a big portion of that. And some of this even goes down to into the supply chain a little bit as well. So we had another one here in Florida. It was actually Florida City, and it was a phishing attack that started as a supply chain. There was an Florida City airport, is the Ocala International Airport. They had a contractor that was working for them, a construction company. The bad guys targeted them, got into their systems, got enough information, and then crafted an email basically asking for payment and sent it up to the Ocala International Airport, the one running the actual construction bid. And they saw it. It came from legit sources. They had the correct information on there, so they paid it. They walked away with, I believe, $742,000 on the bad guy side. I mean, it's just crazy.
Wow. Do you see more of these like hybrid attacks? I don't know if there's a name for them, but it just seems like it's a hybrid between email and phone, and with the amount of information that's available these days for somebody who owns a small business, it would seem pretty easy to be able to spoof executives, bank officials, other people more convincingly, I should say, than the ones we get in many cases like your social security scams. But legitimate business attacks seem like it'd be a lot easier with a hybrid attack.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, coming at you with multiple venues. Maybe you had an email come through, and then they sent had a voice follow-up call in there. Hey, did you get that email that I just sent you? So it's a little more, I guess, believable at that point, because yes, I
Right.
did just get the email. I didn't have time to review it yet, but I see it sitting there. And again, we start putting that sense of urgency on if I have to deal with this now. So I kind of let my guard down a little bit, and I don't pay attention to all the little details as much as I should. So yeah, those hybrid attack. I think that's been the way it's been forever. It's becoming more and more evolved.
Right. And they're not misspelling things anymore like they did before. Yeah, they're
Yeah.
pretty scary. When you saw, I think I got it was a Citibank looking spam that came in last week. Obviously, phishing attack didn't even have my name on it, but if you looked at the things, you could find the little things that didn't match. And I went up on my actual account rather than going through email. It's one piece I took away. I don't know if it was you that had told me, but someone at one of the events said, you know what, don't even answer anything through email or click any links. Just go to your accounts separately, sign in your secure account, especially if it's two-factor authentication, and check to see if you have messages that way. That's at least one way to go about that, but I don't know if everybody does that these days.
Again, it's going to be one of those things. It's convenience.
Yeah.
Is going to be a big part of that as well. And I do the same thing you do. And I don't remember if we had that conversation or not, but even if I get a legitimate email from my bank
Yeah.
or from Netflix, and I know I've got my Netflix account and it makes it to the right account, it doesn't come to my my work account. I don't click on anything inside of there. It's informational. I'm like, great. And just like you, I log on to those websites and I view the alerts from there and I view the information from that side of it. I get secured access in because email is easily intercepted. It's not secured from point A to point B in most cases. So yeah, and again, these bad guys are getting really good at spoofing what websites look like and crafting these emails to where they're really identical. And even on Netflix, putting just an extra I in there, which at first glance, I mean, you can't even see that.
Yeah. Yeah. I had the other convincing one is DocuSign, which is for anybody who signs a lot of documents and uses that one, that's kind of a scary thing because they have spoofed it completely. But again, they left the name off of it. I've had that happen twice to me. But normally for somebody who's busy in a hurry, it's like, oh, I got a latest document in. I've taken the practice of just calling my clients to ask them, did you send me a document out today? Normally they'll give me a heads up before I'll click on anything coming through, even if it has my name on it. But yeah, those things, and they're regularly sent through email, and that's how you normally sign it. You click on it, you go through and complete the document.
Yep.
But
So bad guys are preying upon how we normally behave. So
yeah,
I think the biggest thing, the biggest takeaway from all of that is no matter who is asking you for that information or to complete a project for them or send a payment, verify it with somebody else. Go back through another channel. Pick up the phone directly and call that CEO or call that person who is just called you. Call them back even. Hey, is this legit? Did you really want to do this? And it's just a quick and easy way to verify that you are talking to the correct person.
right. Now, we've been talking about MSPs clients a lot now. We're assuming that some of these attacks are more organized that are going after MSPs these days, and that's one of the things. It's nothing new. We've been talking about it quite a bit in the IOTA community, and I know you've hit on that in your presentation as well. But how should providers be addressing the cybersecurity risks inside their own businesses? Any special tips to share?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we've got you need to go in and take an assessment of your network is going to be the biggest component on there, and MSPs need to realize, again, when we were talking about that, the supply chain on there, that they are part of that supply chain. They are providing those services, and those services happen to have the keys to the kingdom to all of their customers, which is why the bad guys are actually targeting them. So I think the biggest thing they need to do, and this is not even going to be everything that necessarily Sophos has to offer, but get a risk assessment. Get some sort of a security audit against your company from a third party. If you're taking on all of this risk to go and service your customers, bring somebody in to analyze your business. You're there to analyze your customers' businesses and make sure that all their security practices are in line. And what happens more often than not, and when I was an MSP, we were probably guilty of this as well, just because you've got to, it doesn't make any money to deal with your own network, unfortunately. But go in and have somebody do that assessment on there. Make sure your networks are segmented. Make sure those tools that you're accessing have the multi-factor authentication on there. Make sure we're locking down remote access. How are we? Everything is, again, made to be ease of use on there. I mean, I do that here at work. We've got a lot of different components, a lot of different multi-factor authentication for what I need to get into my work, being a remote worker from home. And a lot of that is secure VPN access in there with the multi-factor authentication to secure the knowledge of who am I. We've also got digital certificates on top of that. So a lot of that goes into effect when securing your business. And once you have your house in order, then it's a lot easier to say, yes, we're protected, we're secured. Add on those next gen business tools on there and services that you can go and use to protect your systems as well. Again, part of that goes back to eating your own dog food in a way. So if you are a Sophos shop, for instance, we give away all of our software to our partners as NFRs for free. We want you guys to have this because we want you to use this inside of your organization to understand how to better protect your customers, how all those pieces talking together, sharing threat intelligence helps to put all those puzzle pieces together and alert you if something's happening at the endpoint, and also alert you for the firewall team seeing it on the actual perimeter as well. So yeah, all those things come together and kind of help mitigate the risk. Unfortunately, there is no silver bullet out there. I mean, I hate to say that. There's no silver bullet. We can do everything we can. We just have to stay vigilant.
So doing everything every day is just going to continue and get more complicated. But now you were talking about some of the next gen tools. What's ahead for Sophos in 2020? What things are you working on right now, Steve?
Yeah, so 2020 is going to bring a lot of integrations into our products with the RMM tools. One of the biggest things, and what we've recently actually just launched this year, which will be a major component for MSPs and for their customers as well, is our managed threat response service. So this is in addition to our next-gen endpoint with our Intercept X, our anti-ransomware components, our anti-exploit components that are taking action on things that we can identify, things that we can stop on the network. This puts additional monitors and controls on those networks into the OS query level and sends all that information to a Sophos SOC, where we have our threat analysts sitting behind there and digging into what's going on inside of your networks as the MSP. So again, taking that additional step to have that 24/7 monitoring and response component inside your network, and doing the same for your customers as well. So that if we see an active adversary in your network who maybe is landed on that network and they're lying dormant, their main goal is to not necessarily encrypt your data. Maybe they haven't found the payload or anything that's worth anything on there, and they're working to find the next person they can hop to. Having somebody analyze that data, see those trends happening inside of your network, and be able to pinpoint that information, say, hey, is this supposed to be happening? Are we supposed to be making these PS exec calls, or are we supposed to be doing these hash dumps inside of the network? And having that SOC behind you, which again, most MSPs are not MSSPs. We have to outsource those services. So having that available as an add-on service through Sophos is going to be huge in helping our partners and our customers be able to be a little more security conscious and a little better protected.
So you're looking obviously more proactive, and I know we've used that word proactive a lot in the channel probably the last decade, but it seems like now in the security space, it's using artificial intelligence and other tools to look further out for the trends before they're even become an attack on your clients and on your own, and on your own systems too, if you're an MSP today. They're putting a lot of those type of technologies into your tool set now?
Yeah, absolutely. So AI is like we were talking earlier. AI is pretty much permeating everywhere. I mean, everywhere you look, AI has something to do with something that you are utilizing. Whether it's your Amazon Alexa or your Google Home in your house, all run by AI. So part of our next gen endpoint is an artificial intelligence engine inside of there. Part of that managed threat response component on there as well is an AI understanding to help bubble those threats that we're seeing, all that information. There is a ton of data that is actually being collected inside of there, and to correlate all that information individually as an actual threat analyst would take a huge amount of time. So with AI, we're able to bring all those components together, sort through that noise a lot quicker and a lot faster, and get the pertinent information up to the threat analyst so they can actually go and deal with that threat. And the same thing for our customers that are simply just using the Intercept X components on there. So as we see a piece of software come into the environment, an executable, something happening or executing in the environment, be able to intelligently go in and very fast, instantly dissect that component and say, is this good or bad? What are the components we're seeing? What are the similarities between other components that we've seen in the environment? Not necessarily a signature. We know this is bad. This is this particular piece of ransomware. We know exactly what it looks like. It matches its mugshot, but it's very similar at all these different components, and that we can now match up against it. And you'll see in that across the entire industry. That's not something that is exclusive to Sophos. I think anybody and everybody at this point has realized that AI is a huge tool that needs to be used in their environment.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I know I was talking to someone on the awareness training side yesterday too, and looking at ways they can apply AI to human behavior to figure out when end users are being trained or throwing different threats at end users to see how they respond. And they're using computer simulations to try to figure this out and get tighter on their algorithms and the type of specific training modules that they're creating. So, I mean, when you layer that on top of, more advanced cybersecurity, is we know nothing's infallible, but hopefully we're getting a little more closer to where people can spot the scams and at least force them to do different tactics rather than be that low hanging fruit that the bad guys are looking for.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very good. So let's talk specifically about the things that your team is doing to help MSPs protect their own. You mentioned eating your own dog food or drinking your own champagne. That's one of my more favorite terms now. I can visualize that one a lot easier. But what is your team doing to help MSPs kind of boost their own business too before they're rolling these things out to their clients?
Yeah, so a lot of that comes down to just partner training events. What we've been doing around the globe is these partner training events, more intimate locations, bring in 30, 40, 50 partners in each different location, talk to them about how to utilize the tools, how to manage the actual tools in Sophos Central, instead of just, hey, let's come in here, go through the guides, make your way on your own. Let's come in, show you what's going on with the product. Let's show you how to utilize this to its absolute fullest. So those training events have been very successful, a lot of great feedback, and we're going to start morphing those into a little bit of an interactive be the hacker kind of campaign as well. We're already doing these today, and they've been hugely successful. Partners and customers are loving it because they can get a little bit more of a glimpse as to what is the bad guy doing, how are they operating, and how are they able to get into these environments, and with the level of ease that if we're not protecting and managing, and we actually put them in front of the keyboard, give them all the tools and the scripts to follow through, and right from a Kali Linux box they go through, which is readily available. We don't doctor it all. They go through and start implementing these attacks against workstations. So again, just eye-opening events of this is the type of attacks that are out there, and it's not that they're difficult. The bad guys are making this extremely easy. They've got the ransomware as a service, the exploiting as a service. So you don't have to be that all empowered hacker that's out there that knows how all this stuff works. You just get on the dark web and search for it, and that's scary. So yeah, I mean, a lot of that is tying all that together, the education component. And then the last piece, which I mentioned earlier, was the integration component on there. Want to make sure that a lot of our MSPs they live and die inside of their PSA tools and their RMM tools, and having to go to yet another console for them, which unfortunately is needed because we can't bring everything that we do inside of the RMM tool, but we want to bring as much as we can, as much alerting, statuses, endpoints that we can into their tools that they use on a day-to-day basis. Again, bringing more visibility and more awareness so that if something has an alert, if something has an error sitting out there, it doesn't go unnoticed until the next time somebody happens to log into our dashboard. So for us, those integrations are going to be key. And I know we're a little late to that game. A lot of the other vendors have had a lot of integrations out there. We focus solely and heavily on making sure we have the best in breed protection out there. And now we're working on making sure we have that best in breed integration as well.
Very good. Now, Steve, you sat on both sides of the house. You've been an MSP. You're on the vendor side now. Do you think, and I'm seeing this a little more, is having a security champion or a CISO inside MSP, especially those that have 5 to 10 employees, have one person that's kind of championing the training, championing the internal controls for their business? Are you seeing more of that these days, or what are your thoughts on that subject?
I'm not personally seeing it because I'm typically not involved in the internal discussions, but absolutely, I definitely agree that if it's just put out there as a, hey, everybody go get trained, go read these articles, or go educate yourself on these components, and it's not really being controlled by somebody, it doesn't happen. Everybody, we're all busy. I mean, there's tons of things that I really should be reading, and thankfully I've got a great team behind me as well that takes and correlates a lot of these documents, a lot of these articles, and puts them in really nice, neat little bundles that I can take 10, 15 minutes out of my day and run through. But yeah, a lot of that is, a lot of people don't have a lot of those components. So you have to go and research. So having that person who could take that information and do that same thing, boil this, this big, huge white paper that came out on a particular ransomware down to here are the things we need to watch out for. Here's what you need to know about it. Yeah, absolutely. That'd be very valuable for any company.
And tailor it to their own business and their own clients as well, some of the behaviors that they do. So great. Well, fantastic. Appreciate your insight on that. Now, we're getting down to the end of the half hour here. Wanted to make sure, do you have any final thoughts you'd like to leave with our audience before we close out today?
Final thoughts, again, make sure you go in, protect your network. When we're going and taking a look at cybersecurity, again, I know the answer with your customers has always been, just find the cheapest solution, put that standard AV on there. Really what you guys need to be doing as an MSP is evaluating. And again, this goes the same for Sophos. If you guys were to come over to us, we want you to get in there. Again, that's why we give you the NFRs. We want you to put us through the paces and ensure that we are the best fit. You see the best value in the protection on there. So don't just go with whatever's the cheapest, whatever's going to beat that next quote out there, which unfortunately, which is a lot of ways that bidding works. Pick the cheapest vendor. And unfortunately, that sucks. You have to put yourself in there as not as the cheapest vendor, but the most value-added vendor that's out there.
Great insight. So thank you. So on behalf of IOTA, I would love to thank Steve Weber of Sophos for joining us today to discuss the cybersecurity best practices and giving us an update on Sophos. Please tune in every Wednesday for new episodes of the Secure Connections podcast and check out our practical security practice building resources at iota.com. Have a safe, secure, and highly profitable day.